I stared at the email in disbelief, my coffee growing cold beside me as the words on the screen blurred through my tears. My parents had made their decision final. The family business I had helped build for 8 years was going entirely to my brother Ryan. "He deserves it," they wrote, as if those 3 simple words could erase years of my dedication. Little did any of us know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change our family forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The notification had arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was at my desk in the small apartment I'd been renting since moving out of the family home 3 years ago. I'd been going through some financial reports, ironically for the family business, when my laptop chimed with a new email. The sender was my father's attorney, Mr. Winters. The subject line read simply, "Kingston Family Business, Final Arrangements." I'd been expecting this email for months, ever since my parents announced their retirement plans. What I hadn't expected was the content. I read it twice, then a third time, hoping that somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. "Dear Eliza, as per your parents' instructions, I am informing you that Kingston Agricultural Supplies will transfer in its entirety to Ryan Kingston upon their retirement next month. Your parents have asked me to convey that this decision was made after careful consideration of both your futures. They believe that Ryan's recent commitment to the business demonstrates that he deserves this opportunity." The email continued with legal details, but I couldn't focus on them. My mind was stuck on that word, deserves, as if I had somehow been deemed undeserving of the business I had poured my heart into since I was 22. I closed my laptop and moved to the window of my apartment, looking out at the familiar skyline of Westbrook, the small agricultural town where 4 generations of Kingstons had built their lives. My great-grandfather had started Kingston Agricultural Supplies during the Dust Bowl era, providing seeds and equipment to farmers who were struggling to survive. Each generation had expanded it, my father turning it into the most respected agricultural supply company in 3 counties, and I had been part of that legacy. While Ryan had spent his 20s bouncing between colleges and careers, I had stepped up after business school and helped modernize our inventory systems, established our online presence, and personally secured contracts with organic farmers that had boosted our revenue by 30%. Yet somehow, none of that mattered now. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious. "Eliza, honey, I was just about to call you." "Were you?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Before or after I read the email saying you're giving everything to Ryan?" There was a long pause. "Your father and I thought it would be easier this way, with Mr. Winters explaining the legal aspects." I paced across my living room, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't care about the legal aspects, Mom. I want to know why. I've dedicated my life to the business. Ryan spent the last 10 years avoiding responsibility, and now suddenly he deserves it? What about me? What about everything I've done? Eliza, please try to understand. Ryan has finally found his purpose. He's been working so hard these past 2 years." "2 years?" I interrupted. "I've been there for 8. "Yes, but—" My mother hesitated. "Ryan needs this, Eliza. You've always been the strong one, the capable one. You'll land on your feet anywhere. Ryan has struggled so much, and now that he's finally showing interest in his heritage, we can't discourage him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So I'm being punished for being reliable, for not having a quarter-life crisis?" "It's not a punishment, honey. We've set aside a cash settlement for you. You can start something new. Go anywhere you want." "I don't want to go anywhere," I said quietly. "I want what I've earned." The conversation ended with neither of us satisfied. I felt hollow, betrayed, in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't just about the business. It was about recognition, about being seen for who I was and what I had contributed. That evening, I met my best friend Nora at our favorite diner on the edge of town. The neon sign of Farley's buzzed overhead as I pushed open the door, the familiar smell of coffee and pie providing little comfort. Nora was already in our usual booth, her dark curls pulled back, her expression somewhere between sympathy and outrage as I slid into the seat across from her. "Tell me everything," she said, pushing a waiting cup of coffee toward me. I recounted the email, my conversation with my mother, the sick feeling that had been growing in my stomach all day. "They're giving Ryan a settlement too," I added, staring into my coffee. 10% of the company's value, so about $500,000. Nora raised her eyebrows. "And what are you getting?" $200,000. The number felt small, inadequate compared to what I had put into the business. "Apparently that's what my contribution is worth." "That's insulting," Nora said, not bothering to hide her anger. "What are you going to do?" I shook my head. "What can I do? The business is theirs to give. Legally, I have no claim." "But morally? Ethically? You built half of what that company is today." I knew she was right, but hearing it spoken aloud just made the pain sharper. "Ryan has always been their blind spot," I said. "They've spent so long worrying about him, making excuses for him, that they can't see straight when it comes to his potential." Nora reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to just accept this, Eliza. What do you suggest? Suing my own parents?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "No," she said thoughtfully, "but maybe it's time to show them exactly what they're losing." The next day, I drove to my parents' house, a sprawling farmhouse on the outskirts of town that had been in the family for generations. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I spotted Ryan's new sports car parked haphazardly by the front door. Of course he was here. He'd practically moved back in since being named the heir apparent. My father answered the door, his tall frame slightly stooped now with age, his once dark hair completely gray. For a moment, I saw uncertainty in his eyes, as if he wasn't sure how to greet me after what had happened. Then he pulled me into a brief, awkward hug. "Eliza, I was hoping you'd come by." "We need to talk, Dad," I said, following him into the familiar living room with its weathered leather furniture and family photos covering every surface. I noticed there were newer photos of Ryan prominently displayed, Ryan in a suit at some business function, Ryan shaking hands with the mayor. My most recent photo was from my college graduation 6 years ago. Ryan was sprawled on the couch, his feet up on the coffee table, scrolling through his phone. He glanced up when I entered, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Hey, sis, come to congratulate me?" I ignored him, turning to my father. "I want to understand this decision. I deserve that much." My father sighed, gesturing for me to sit down. "This isn't personal, Eliza. It's about what's best for the business going forward." "And you think that's Ryan?" I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. "I've changed," Ryan interjected, sitting up straighter. "You've been so busy judging me that you haven't noticed." 2 years, Ryan. You've been at the company for 2 years and you've already missed more workdays than I have in 8. He rolled his eyes. "It's not about punching a clock, Eliza. It's about vision. Dad sees that I've got bigger plans for Kingston." I turned back to my father. "Is that true? Because I've presented expansion plans 3 times in the past 2 years, and you've shut them down every time." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Ryan has connections, Eliza. His approach is more ambitious." "Ambitious?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Ryan stood up, his casual demeanor slipping. "Look, I know you're upset, But this was always going to be mine eventually. I'm the son. That's how it works. The blatant sexism struck me like a physical blow. I looked at my father, waiting for him to correct this outdated thinking, to defend me. But he just looked away, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the rug. "Wow," I said quietly. "So that's it. 8 years of my life, and it comes down to biology." "That's not what I meant," my father started, but I cut him off. "It's exactly what he meant, and you didn't disagree," I said. "I've given everything to this company. I turned down job offers from major agricultural corporations to stay here. I developed the online ordering system that increased our sales by 30%. I personally secured the Greenfield Cooperative account that makes up a fifth of our annual revenue. And none of that matters because I wasn't born a son?" Ryan had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but he recovered quickly. "You're being dramatic. Mom and Dad are offering you a generous settlement." "Generous?" I laughed without humor. "It's a fraction of what the business is worth, a fraction of what I've helped build." My father cleared his throat. "Eliza, we recognize your contribution. That's why we're giving you the settlement. But Ryan has shown real leadership potential these past 2 years. He's the right person to take Kingston into the future." I looked between them, the two men of the Kingston family, united in their conviction despite all evidence to the contrary. I thought of all the late nights I'd worked, the weekends sacrificed, the relationships I'd put on hold to be there for the business. And for what? To be dismissed with a pat on the head and a token payment. "Fine," I said, standing up. "If that's your decision, I can't change it. But I want you both to remember this moment. Remember what you're throwing away." As I turned to leave, my father called after me. "Eliza, don't leave like this. We're still family." I paused at the door. "Family respects each other, Dad." "Family? Values contribution. This isn't what family does." I walked out, the door closing heavily behind me. As I got into my car, I caught a glimpse of my mother watching from the kitchen window, her expression unreadable. I wondered if she had fought for me at all, or if she too believed that Ryan somehow deserved this more than I did. Driving back to my apartment, I felt strangely calm. The shock and hurt were still there, but beneath them was something else: determination. I had spent years proving myself at Kingston Agricultural Supplies, trying to earn approval that apparently was never going to come. Maybe it was time to prove something to myself instead. The next morning, I sent a simple email to my father. "I hereby tender my resignation from Kingston Agricultural Supplies, effective immediately. I've already transferred all my projects to the appropriate departments and left detailed notes on all ongoing initiatives. I wish you and Ryan success in your future endeavors. Regards, Eliza Kingston." I sent similar emails to our department heads and major clients I had personal relationships with, thanking them for the opportunity to work together. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing constantly with messages, confusion from colleagues, concern from clients, and 3 missed calls from my father. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the task I had set for myself. If Kingston Agricultural Supplies didn't value what I brought to the table, I would find somewhere that did. Or better yet, create that place myself. By mid-afternoon, the calls from my parents had become more insistent. I finally answered my mother's call, if only to stop the constant ringing. "Eliza, what are you doing?" Her voice was strained. "You can't just quit without notice. There are protocols, responsibilities, all of which I've addressed in my handover notes," I replied calmly. "Everything is documented, organized, and ready for whoever takes over my position. I've fulfilled all my professional obligations." "But why leave it all? Your father and I thought you'd stay on, help Ryan learn the ropes." I closed my eyes, counted to 3. "Let me get this straight. You're giving the company to Ryan because he supposedly deserves it more than me. But you still expected me to stay and teach him how to do the job I've been doing successfully for years? Well, when you put it like that, that's exactly how it is, Mom. You can't have it both ways. If Ryan deserves to run the company, then he should be capable of doing it without me holding his hand. There was a long pause before my mother spoke again, her voice softer. We never meant to hurt you, Eliza. We just wanted what's best for everyone. What's best for Ryan, you mean? I corrected. But it's done now. I'll come by this weekend to get my personal belongings from the office, and then you won't have to worry about me interfering with Ryan's grand vision for the company. After hanging up, I turned my phone off completely, needing space from the family drama. I spent the next few days in a state of focused productivity, updating my resume, reaching out to old contacts from business school, researching the current agricultural supply market. If I was going to build something new, I needed to understand exactly where the opportunities lay. On Saturday morning, I drove to the Kingston Agricultural Supplies office, hoping to slip in and out without much interaction. The building was mostly empty on weekends, with just a skeleton staff handling any emergency orders. As I packed up, my office, family photos, reference books, the small potted succulent Nora had given me when I was promoted to operations manager, I heard a knock on the doorframe. Looking up, I was surprised to see Linda, our head of accounts, standing there with a concerned expression. "So it's true," she said. "You're really leaving." I nodded, placing another book in my cardboard box. It's time for a change. Linda stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. She had been with Kingston for almost 30 years, having started working for my grandfather. Her opinion carried significant weight with both the staff and our long-term clients. "This isn't right, Eliza," she said bluntly. "Everyone knows what you've done for this company. Ryan doesn't have a fraction of your knowledge or commitment." I shrugged, trying to appear more detached than I felt. "It's not my decision to make." "No, but it's a damn foolish one," Linda replied, perching on the edge of my desk. "And the timing couldn't be worse, with the Southwest expansion plans in motion." This caught my attention. "What Southwest expansion plans?" Linda raised her eyebrows. "Ryan didn't tell you? He convinced your father to take out a significant loan to open 3 new stores across the Southwest. It's been his pet project for months." I felt a chill run down my spine. The agricultural market in the Southwest was notoriously volatile, subject to extreme weather conditions and water restrictions. I had researched expansion in that direction myself 2 years ago and concluded it was too risky without substantial cash reserves as a safety net. "How significant a loan are we talking about?" I asked carefully. Linda leaned closer. $7 million. They're leveraging almost everything. The main store property, the warehouse, even your parents' house. I sat down heavily in my chair. That's insane. The market analysis doesn't support that kind of investment there, not with the current drought conditions. Try telling that to Ryan. He's got your father convinced it's the opportunity of a lifetime. I ran a hand through my hair, mind racing. When did this happen? The loan was finalized last week. They're moving fast. Already put down deposits on properties in Phoenix, Tucson, and Albuquerque. I wanted to rush to my father's office, to show him the market research, to make him understand the risk he was taking. But then I remembered, this wasn't my company anymore. This wasn't my problem to solve. "I hope it works out for them," I said, resuming my packing with hands that weren't quite steady. Linda gave me a long look. "You know it won't. And when it falls apart, they're going to wish they'd listened to you." As I drove home with my box of belongings, Linda's words echoed in my mind. $7 million, most of the company assets as collateral. It was a catastrophically risky move, especially with Ryan at the helm. His business acumen had always been questionable at best, his attention span limited, his understanding of agricultural markets minimal. For a moment, I considered calling my father, warning him one last time. But what good would it do? He had made his choice. They all had. Instead, I drove to Nora's apartment, needing to talk to someone who would understand. She listened as I explained what Linda had told me, her expression growing increasingly alarmed. "They're going to lose everything," she concluded when I finished. "Probably," I agreed. "But I can't stop them. They don't want my input." Nora studied me for a moment. "So, what are you going to do?" I looked out her window at the town I'd grown up in, the place where generations of my family had built their legacy. "I'm going to build something new. Something that's mine." Over the next month, I threw myself into planning my next move. Using my savings and a portion of the settlement money, I secured a small business loan and leased a modest commercial space on the other side of town. My plan wasn't to compete directly with Kingston Agricultural Supplies. That would be both petty and potentially self-destructive. Instead, I focused on an area they had consistently neglected: sustainable and organic farming supplies. I named my new venture Green Horizon Agricultural Consulting, positioning it as both a supply company and a consulting firm for farmers looking to transition to more sustainable practices. It was a growing niche in our region, and one I had been advocating for Kingston to enter for years. The launch was small but promising. Several of Kingston's clients who had worked primarily with me over the years discreetly reached out, curious about my new venture. I was careful not to actively poach business, but I didn't turn away those who came seeking my expertise either. I avoided family gatherings during this time, using the demands of my new business as an excuse. The truth was, I couldn't bear to sit across from Ryan and my parents, pretending that everything was fine. It wasn't fine. The rift between us felt insurmountable, built on years of unbalanced expectations and culminating in the final betrayal of the inheritance decision. Then, 6 months after I left Kingston Agricultural Supplies, I received a call from an unknown number while working late at my office. I hesitated before answering. "Green Horizon, this is Eliza." There was a pause, then a familiar voice. "Eliza." "It's Dad." I straightened in my chair, instantly alert. My father rarely called me these days. Our communication had dwindled to terse text messages and awkward small talk on the rare occasions we crossed paths in town. "Dad, is everything okay?" His answer was slow in coming. "No, everything is not okay." His voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. "I need to see you. Can you come to the house tonight?" Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I arrived at my parents' house to find the front door open, light spilling onto the porch. Inside, my father sat alone at the kitchen table, a tumbler of whiskey in front of him. He looked up when I entered, and I was startled by how much he seemed to have aged in just 6 months. The confident businessman I had admired all my life looked defeated. "Where's Mom?" I asked, hanging my coat on the back of a chair. "Upstairs, taking a sedative." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down, Eliza. I need to tell you something." I sat, bracing myself for whatever was coming. My father took a deep breath, then met my eyes directly. "Kingston Agricultural Supplies is bankrupt. We've lost everything." The words hung in the air between us. Despite Linda's warning, despite my own misgivings about the Southwest expansion, hearing it stated so bluntly was still a shock. "The expansion?" I asked, already knowing the answer. My father nodded. The stores were a disaster from the start. Construction delays, permit issues, then a severe drought hit the region just as we were opening. Sales were a fraction of what Ryan projected. He took a sip of his whiskey, his hand not entirely steady. "We tried to cut our losses, to pull back, but the debt was too much. We missed loan payments. The bank is foreclosing." The main store too? Everything. The main store, the warehouse, this house. He gestured around the kitchen where I had grown up. It's all gone. I felt a complex mix of emotions, sorrow for my parents, for the family legacy crumbling, but also a vindication that burned like acid. I had seen this coming. I had tried to warn them. What about Ryan? I asked. My father's expression hardened. Ryan has disappeared, cleaned out his bank account and left town 2 days ago. No note, no explanation. This, I hadn't expected. He just left, with the company failing? With the company already failed, my father corrected bitterly. He knew before anyone else how bad it was. He had access to all the numbers. After all. I sat back, trying to process everything. What are you going to do now? Your mother and I are moving to her sister's place in Vermont next week. We don't have many options left. He looked down at his glass. I'm sorry, Eliza. I should have listened to you about everything. The apology, as inadequate as it was against the magnitude of what had happened, still caught me off guard. My father had never been one to admit mistakes easily. Why are you telling me this? I asked cautiously. He looked up, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and hope. Because I wanted you to hear it from me. And because... He hesitated. Because I thought maybe you might know what to do. You always did. I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let them face the consequences of their choices without my intervention. They had chosen Ryan. They had dismissed my contributions, my warnings, my value to the company. Why should I rescue them now? But another part of me, the part that had loved Kingston Agricultural Supplies, that had seen it as more than just a business but as our family's legacy and a vital service to our farming community, couldn't just let it die. I need to see the books, I said finally. All of them. I need to understand exactly how bad it is. My father nodded, relief visible in his expression. Everything's in my office, Ryan's office now, I suppose. I spent the next 3 hours poring over financial statements, loan documents, and sales projections. The picture that emerged was even bleaker than I had anticipated. The Southwest expansion had been catastrophically mismanaged, with costs spiraling far beyond projections and revenues coming in at less than a quarter of the forecasted amounts. But that wasn't all. As I dug deeper, I discovered discrepancies that couldn't be explained by simple market failures. Large sums had been transferred to external accounts, labeled vaguely as consulting fees or market research. The timing and amount suggested something more troubling. "Dad?" I called, still staring at the screen. "Did you authorize payments?" To a company called Vertex Consulting? My father appeared in the doorway, frowning. "No, I've never heard of them. Ryan handled most of the expansion logistics." I turned the laptop so he could see the screen. Over the past 4 months, nearly $500,000 has been paid to this company. I can't find any records of what services they provided. My father's face drained of color as the implication became clear. Ryan hadn't just abandoned a failing business, he had been systematically siphoning money from it. "I trusted him," my father whispered, his voice breaking. I closed the laptop, unable to look at the evidence of my brother's betrayal any longer. "I know you did." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of everything that had been lost hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. "There might be a way to salvage something from this. Not the whole company, not as it was, but maybe enough to give you and Mom a fresh start." "How?" My father looked up, a glimmer of his old determination returning. "I'll need a few days to work it out," I said, standing up. "But I have some ideas, and I know people who might be willing to help." As I drove home that night, my mind was already working through possibilities. The Kingston name still held value in our community. The customer relationships I had cultivated over the years could be leveraged. And my own business, Green Horizon, was small but growing steadily. Perhaps there was a way to honor the legacy of Kingston Agricultural Supplies while building something new from its ashes. Something that wouldn't erase the pain of being passed over, of being deemed less deserving than my brother, but might begin to heal the wound. I wasn't doing this for my parents, I told myself. I was doing it for the generations of Kingstons who had built something worth preserving, for the community that relied on the services we provided, for myself, and the part of me that would always be connected to the family business, regardless of who technically owned it. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in months, I felt something like purpose. Not just the drive to prove myself, but the determination to rebuild what had been lost, not exactly as it was, but perhaps as something better. Something stronger. Something that couldn't be destroyed by one person's poor choices or another's misplaced trust. The revelation of Kingston Agricultural Supplies bankruptcy was just the beginning. As I drove home from my parents' house that night, my mind raced with possibilities, calculations, and the uncomfortable weight of responsibility I hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building and just sat there, engine off, staring into the darkness. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "How bad is it?" I replied simply, "Total collapse. Ryan's gone. Took money with him." Her response came quickly. "Come over. You shouldn't be alone. Right now." An hour later, I was sitting at Nora's kitchen table, a steaming mug of tea between my hands as I explained everything. The bankruptcy, the foreclosures, the evidence of Ryan's embezzlement, and my father's broken confession. I knew it would go badly, I said, but I never imagined Ryan would steal from them. Nora's expression was a mixture of shock and vindication. "What are you going to do? Surely you're not thinking of trying to save the business." I took a sip of tea, buying time before answering. "Not as it was, no, that's impossible, but there might be a way to salvage something from the wreckage." "Eliza," Nora said cautiously, "this isn't your responsibility. They chose Ryan. They pushed you aside. Why should you be the one to fix their mistakes?" It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself since driving away from my parents' house. "It's not about them," I said finally. "It's about the 43 employees who are about to lose their jobs. It's about the hundreds of farmers in 3 counties who rely on Kingston's supplies. And maybe," I hesitated, "maybe it's about proving what I've known all along, that I was the right person to run the company." Nora studied me for a long moment. "Okay, if anyone can salvage something from this mess, it's you. Where do you start?" The following morning, I arrived at Green Horizon's office at dawn. The modestly furnished space felt quiet and purposeful compared to the grandeur of Kingston's headquarters. I had built this place with careful planning and frugality, a stark contrast to Ryan's reckless expansion. I opened my laptop and began drafting a plan. First, I needed to determine exactly which assets of Kingston Agricultural Supplies might be salvageable and what it would take to acquire them. The main store and warehouse were certainly lost. The bank would claim those to recover the defaulted loans. But there were other assets: the inventory, the customer contracts, the supplier relationships, and most importantly, the institutional knowledge held by key employees. By 9 o'clock, I had a rough framework. It wasn't a plan to save Kingston Agricultural Supplies, that ship had sailed, but rather to absorb the most valuable parts of it into Green Horizon, allowing me to expand my business while preserving jobs and customer relationships. I called Linda from Kingston's accounting department first. "I need your help," I said when she answered, "and I may have a proposition for you." "I've been waiting for this call," she replied. "When do you want to meet?" We arranged to meet for lunch that day at a cafe far from both Kingston's headquarters and the usual business lunch spots in town. I didn't want word of our meeting getting back to my parents just yet, not until I had something concrete to propose. Linda arrived looking harried but determined. "The bank's auditors are crawling all over the place," she said as she slid into the booth across from me. "Your father hasn't been in for 3 days. Most of the staff are updating their resumes." I nodded, having expected as much. I need to know exactly what's still viable at Kingston, what could be extracted and rebuilt elsewhere. Linda didn't even blink at my directness. "You're planning a rescue mission?" "Something like that." She pulled a flash drive from her purse and slid it across the table. "I thought you might. I've compiled everything you'll need: current inventory lists, contract statuses, outstanding obligations, employee details, and supplier agreements. The critical stuff that would take months to reconstruct from scratch." I stared at the small device, momentarily speechless. "You've been preparing for this." She gave me a sad smile. "I've been with Kingston for 30 years, Eliza. I was there when your grandfather handed the reins to your father. I watched you grow up in that business. I knew when they chose Ryan that this day would come. I just didn't expect it so soon." "Thank you," I said, pocketing the flash drive. "This will be invaluable." "There's something else you should know." Linda leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Several of the key suppliers have stopped shipments due to unpaid invoices. The farmers who rely on our seed deliveries this month are going to be left high and dry. The timing couldn't be worse with planting season approaching." This was worse than I thought. Local farmers operated on tight schedules and razor-thin margins. A disruption in their supply chain now could devastate their entire growing season. "Who are the main clients affected?" I asked. "I've included that list too," Linda said. "About 25 farms, mostly family operations. They're going to be desperate for those supplies within the next 2 weeks." An idea began forming in my mind. What if Green Horizon could step in? Not to take over Kingston's business entirely, but to fill the immediate gap for those farmers. Linda considered this. It would require significant capital to purchase and distribute that inventory on short notice. "I have some savings," I said, "and the settlement money. Not enough to save Kingston, but maybe enough to help those 25 farms and show what Green Horizon can do." "It's risky," Linda warned. "You'd be stretching yourself thin financially. Sometimes the biggest opportunities come from the biggest risks," I replied, thinking of all the times I'd advocated for calculated risks at Kingston only to be shot down by my father's caution or Ryan's disinterest. If I can help those farmers and demonstrate Green Horizon's capability, it could be the foundation for something bigger. Linda studied me for a moment. "You're not just trying to save a few client relationships. You're positioning yourself to rebuild Kingston under a new name." I didn't deny it. Green Horizon was always meant to grow. This situation just accelerated the timeline. "Count me in," Linda said without hesitation. "And I can name at least 10 other Kingston employees who would follow you in a heartbeat." By the time I returned to my office, I had the beginnings of a real plan. Using the data Linda had provided, I identified the most urgent client needs and calculated what it would take to meet them. The numbers were daunting, but not impossible. I would need to use almost all of my available capital and secure additional, short-term financing. I spent the next 3 days making calls to suppliers, negotiating expedited deliveries, and reaching out discreetly to the farmers on Linda's list. Many were surprised to hear from me, having known me only as the Kingston operations manager, but they were even more surprised and relieved when I offered a solution to their imminent supply problem. "We can't pay Kingston prices," one farmer warned me during a call, "not with the season so uncertain." "Green Horizon can match your current terms for this order," I assured him. "We're building for the long term here." By the end of the week, I had commitments from 22 of the 25 farms on the list. It was a gamble, committing to inventory I didn't yet have for clients I had just acquired, but it was also an opportunity I couldn't pass up. The next step was to secure the additional financing I needed. I had already leveraged most of my personal assets for Green Horizons' initial launch, and the settlement money only covered about 60% of what I needed now. I needed a loan, and quickly. I approached 3 banks with my business plan. The first 2 turned me down, citing the risky nature of the agricultural supply business given the recent failure of Kingston, exactly the comparison I was trying to avoid. The third, a smaller regional bank where I had maintained accounts since college, was more receptive but still hesitant. "Your business model is sound," the loan officer admitted, "but taking on this much expansion so quickly is concerning." And the shadow of Kingston's failure looms large in this sector right now. I leaned forward, determination stealing my voice. Kingston failed because of reckless expansion and poor management, not because the core business wasn't viable. Green Horizon is taking a calculated risk based on established client relationships and immediate market needs. We're not building speculative storefronts in drought-prone regions. We're fulfilling existing contracts that Kingston can no longer service. After 2 more meetings and a thorough review of my projections, the bank finally approved a line of credit, smaller than I had hoped for, but enough to close the gap in my funding needs. I would be operating with almost no financial safety net, but it was a risk I was willing to take. The next challenge was logistics. Green Horizon's current facility was far too small to handle the volume of inventory I needed to process. I needed warehouse space, and quickly. An idea struck me as I was driving past the industrial park on the edge of town. Kingston's warehouse would soon be bank property, but there would be a lag between the foreclosure and any new tenants moving in. What if I could negotiate a short-term lease with the bank? It was audacious, perhaps even a little outrageous, but I had nothing to lose by asking. I contacted the bank handling Kingston's foreclosure and made my proposal: a 3-month lease of the warehouse space at market rates, with an option to extend if mutually agreeable. "You want to lease the warehouse of the company that just went bankrupt to expand your competing business?" the bank representative clarified, sounding incredulous. "Green Horizon isn't competing with Kingston anymore," I pointed out. "Kingston no longer exists as an operational entity. I'm proposing a solution that generates immediate revenue for the bank from an otherwise empty property while serving the community that relied on Kingston's services." To my surprise, the bank agreed, seeing the practical benefits of my proposal. They were more interested in recovering some value from the property than in letting it sit empty during the foreclosure process. As I signed the lease agreement, a strange feeling washed over me. I would be operating my business from the very warehouse I had helped optimize during my years at Kingston. The irony wasn't lost on me, but there was also a sense of rightness to it, as if I was reclaiming something that should have been mine all along. With the warehouse secured, I began the process of staffing up. Linda had been true to her word. 10. Former Kingston employees reached out to me within days of our lunch meeting, each eager to join Green Horizon rather than face unemployment. Among them were some of Kingston's most valuable team members: the logistics coordinator, the inventory manager, 2 experienced sales representatives, and several warehouse staff. I hired them all, explaining frankly that Green Horizon was taking a significant risk and that I couldn't match their Kingston salaries immediately, but I could offer profit sharing once we stabilized. To my surprise, not one of them balked at the terms. "I'd rather work for someone who knows what they're doing at 80% of my old salary than watch another train wreck at full pay," the logistics coordinator told me bluntly. With the team assembled, we worked around the clock to prepare for the incoming inventory and the commitments I had made to the farmers. The warehouse, which had seemed cavernously empty when I first leased it, quickly began to fill with supplies: seeds, fertilizers, equipment parts, and the specialized organic products that had been Green Horizon's original focus. Through it all, I deliberately avoided contact with my parents. I wasn't ready to explain what I was doing, not until I knew whether it would succeed or fail. This was my chance to build something on my terms, without their judgment or interference. But as news of Green Horizons' expansion spread through the tight-knit agricultural community, it was inevitable that my parents would hear about it. 2 weeks into our frantic growth phase, as I was overseeing the organization of the warehouse, my phone rang with my father's number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello, Dad. You've leased our warehouse." It wasn't a question. "I've leased the bank's warehouse," I corrected. "It's not yours anymore." There was a long pause. "What exactly are you doing, Eliza?" I took a deep breath. "I'm building a business. Green Horizon is expanding to meet the needs that Kingston can no longer fulfill. With my former employees, my suppliers, my clients." His voice held a complex mixture of emotions: anger, disbelief, and something that might have been pride. "They're not yours anymore either," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle despite the harsh truth of my words. "Kingston is gone, Dad. I'm just making sure that the farmers who relied on it don't suffer as a result." Another long silence. Then, "Are you doing this to punish me? For choosing Ryan?" The question stung more than I expected. "No," I said firmly. "I'm doing this because it's a good business opportunity, and because it's the right thing to do for this community. Not everything is about you, or Ryan, or even me. Some things are about responsibility to the people who depend on the services we provide." I heard him exhale slowly. "Can I see it? What you're building?" The request caught me off guard. "You want to see Green Horizon?" "Yes, if you're willing." I hesitated, considering the potential complications of having my father visit during this critical phase. But perhaps it was time to face this directly rather than avoiding it. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "Come to the warehouse at 9. I'll show you what we're doing." That night, I barely slept, my mind cycling through all the possible ways the meeting with my father could go. Would he criticize my methods? Try to assert control? Undermine my confidence just as I was taking my biggest risk yet? By the time I arrived at the warehouse the next morning, I had resolved to remain professional regardless of his reaction. This was my business now, my vision, my risk to take. His approval, while it might be personally gratifying, was not necessary for Green Horizon's success. My father arrived precisely at 9, looking older and more subdued than I remembered. He stood for a moment staring up at the warehouse, the building that had been part of Kingston Agricultural Supplies for over 30 years and was now temporarily housing its successor. "Good morning," I said, holding the door open for him. He nodded, following me inside. The warehouse was already buzzing with activity despite the early hour. Forklifts moved pallets of inventory, staff checked shipments against purchase orders, and in one corner, a training session was underway for 2 new employees. My father took it all in silently, his expression unreadable. I led him through the operation, explaining our streamlined processes, the specialized organic product lines we were developing, and our focus on sustainable farming practices. "We're not trying to be Kingston 2.0, I explained as we walked. "Green Horizon has a different philosophy, different priorities, but we're meeting the immediate needs of the farmers who would have been left stranded by Kingston's collapse, and we're building something sustainable for the long term." My father paused by a stack of organic seed packages, products that Kingston had always deemed too niche to carry in significant quantities. "You were right about these," he said quietly. "The organic market. I should have listened when you proposed expanding into it 3 years ago." The admission, small as it was, felt momentous. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply nodded and continued the tour. As we reached my makeshift office, a corner of the warehouse partitioned off with temporary walls, my father finally asked the question I had been waiting for. "How are you financing all this?" I gestured for him to sit in one of the 2 chairs, crammed into the small space. I used my savings, the settlement money, and secured a line of credit. It's tight and it's risky, but the projections are solid. May I see them? He asked. The projections? I hesitated only briefly before pulling up the spreadsheets on my laptop and turning the screen toward him. For all his errors in judgment, with Ryan, my father was still an experienced businessman. His assessment of my financial planning could be valuable. He studied the numbers in silence for several minutes, occasionally zooming in on particular sections. Finally, he looked up, his expression grave. "You've bet everything on this, haven't you?" I nodded. I believe in what we're building. Your cash flow assumptions are aggressive, he pointed out. If the payments from these farms come in even 2 weeks late, you'll be in a precarious position. I've accounted for that possibility, I said, showing him another tab on the spreadsheet. We have contingency plans for delayed payments, including staged delivery options that would reduce our upfront inventory costs. My father continued reviewing the numbers, occasionally asking pointed questions about my assumptions or risk assessments. I answered each one directly, neither defensive nor apologetic. This was my business plan, developed with careful thought and real-world experience. I stood by it. Finally, he sat back in his chair. It's a good plan, Eliza. Better than good. It's brilliant in parts, but it's also dangerously undercapitalized for the scale you're attempting. I know, I admitted, but the opportunity won't... Wait, and this is the capital I have. My father was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving from the laptop to the bustling warehouse beyond my office walls. What if you had more? I frowned. What do you mean? Your mother and we didn't lose absolutely everything. The retirement accounts were separate from the business assets. Protected. He looked back at me, his expression resolved. We were planning to use that money to start over in Vermont, but maybe there's a better use for it. It took me a moment to understand what he was suggesting. You want to invest in Green Horizon after everything that happened with Kingston? Not as owners, he clarified quickly. As silent investors. It would be your company, your decisions. But the additional capital could provide the safety margin you need during this expansion phase. I was speechless, after choosing Ryan over me. After losing almost everything through that choice, my parents were now offering to invest their remaining financial security in my vision. Why? I finally managed to ask. My father looked down at his hands. Because I was wrong, Eliza. Wrong about Ryan, wrong about you, wrong about what was best for the business. I let sentimentality and outdated notions cloud my judgment, and it cost us everything. He met my eyes again. I don't expect you to forgive me easily, but maybe this can be a start, trusting your vision the way I should have all along. The offer was tempting. The additional capital would indeed provide a crucial safety buffer during this precarious expansion phase. But accepting it would also complicate things, emotionally, practically, perhaps even legally. I need to think about it, I said. This isn't a decision I can make right now. My father nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. The offer stands whenever you're ready to discuss it. He stood up to leave, then paused. Regardless of what you decide about the investment, I'm proud of what you're building here, Eliza. I should have said that years ago. As I watched him walk out of the warehouse, I felt a complicated mix of emotions: vindication, lingering hurt, cautious hope, and the weight of decisions still to be made. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but for the first time, I felt like I might be able to build something that honored the Kingston legacy while creating a new future entirely my own. That evening, as I locked up the warehouse after another long day, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message that made my blood run cold. Congrats on the expansion, sis. Heard you're taking over my clients. We should talk. R. Ryan had resurfaced, and suddenly, The challenges of financing and logistics seemed like the least of my worries. Congrats on the expansion, sis. Heard. You're taking over my clients. We should talk. R. I stared at my phone screen, reading Ryan's message for the 10th time. The warehouse around me was silent now, the staff gone home, leaving me alone with the implications of those few words. I could almost hear the smug tone behind them, the casual confidence of someone who had stolen $500,000 and still felt entitled to call me sis. My finger hovered over the delete button. I could ignore him, pretend I never received the message. But experience had taught me that ignoring Ryan only delayed the inevitable. He would find another way to insert himself into my life, likely at the worst possible moment. Instead, I typed a simple reply. Nothing to talk about. Stay away from Green Horizon. His response came almost immediately. Don't be like that. I have connections you could use. Information too. I snorted. Ryan's connections had led Kingston to bankruptcy. His information was likely as valuable as his business advice. Still, curiosity nagged at me. What information? I texted back. Not over text. Meet me tomorrow. The Crossroads Diner, 2 p.m. The Crossroads Diner was on the outskirts of town, a place we'd occasionally stopped at on family trips when we were kids. It was public enough to be safe, but isolated enough for a private conversation. Still, meeting Ryan felt like stepping into a trap. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called Nora. You're not seriously considering meeting him? She asked when I explained the situation. I'm considering understanding what game he's playing, I replied. He embezzled from Kingston, then disappeared, and now he's back right as Green Horizon is gaining traction. That's not coincidence. So what's your plan? Go alone and hope he doesn't try to manipulate you into something? She had a point. Come with me, I suggested. Sit at another table. If things get intense, you can intervene. Nora agreed reluctantly, and I finally texted Ryan back. Fine. Tomorrow at 2. That night, I barely slept, imagining all the possible scenarios. The meeting might bring... Was Ryan looking for money, threatening legal action, planning to sabotage Green Horizon somehow? By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. Whatever Ryan wanted, I would not let him derail everything I was building. The Crossroads Diner looked exactly as I remembered it. Weathered wood exterior, neon sign buzzing in the window, red vinyl booths inside that had seen better days. Nora arrived first, positioning herself at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance but far enough away that Ryan might not notice her. I arrived 5 minutes before our scheduled meeting time, deliberately choosing a booth with my back to the wall and a clear line of sight to the door. The waitress brought me a coffee I didn't really want, and I waited, tension building with each passing minute. Ryan was late, of course, 20 minutes late. It was a power play he had employed since childhood, keeping others waiting to demonstrate his control over the situation. When he finally sauntered through the door, he had the audacity to look annoyed, as if I'd been the one to keep him waiting. He slid into the booth across from me, and I was struck by how unchanged he appeared. While our parents had aged visibly in the aftermath of Kingston's collapse, Ryan looked well-rested and prosperous. His clothes were expensive, his watch new. Clearly, the embezzled funds were serving him well. You look good, Eliza, he said, flashing the charming smile that had convinced so many people to give him second chances. Green Horizon must be treating you right. What do you want, Ryan? I kept my voice flat, unaffected by his attempt at small talk. He signaled the waitress for coffee before answering. Direct as always. That's what I've always admired about you, you know. No games. Unlike you, I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. $500,000, Ryan? From our family business? His expression hardened slightly, then relaxed into something like resignation. It wasn't personal. The business was going down regardless. I just made sure I had a parachute. While Mom and Dad lost everything. He shrugged, a gesture so callous it momentarily took my breath away. They made their choice. They bet on the wrong horse. They bet on you, I hissed, leaning forward. They gave you everything, and you stole from them. Ryan's coffee arrived, creating a momentary pause in our conversation. He took his time adding cream and sugar, stirring methodically before looking up at me again. I didn't come here to rehash the past, he said finally. I came to talk about the future. Your future, specifically. My future is none of your concern. But it is, he insisted, leaning forward. You've made an impressive start with Green. Horizon, taking over Kingston's client base, hiring the staff, even leasing the warehouse. Very resourceful, but you're stretched thin financially. The fact that he knew so much about my operation was unsettling. Your point? I have a proposition. A partnership of sorts. I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud, earning curious glances from the few other diners. A partnership? With you? After what you did to Kingston? Ryan remained unruffled. Kingston was doomed from the start. That expansion plan was Dad's idea, not mine. I just saw the writing on the wall sooner than everyone else. And helped it along by siphoning funds. He waved his hand dismissively. Ancient history. The point is, I have capital now. Capital you need. So that was his game. He wanted to buy his way into Green Horizon using the money he'd stolen from our family. The sheer audacity was stunning. Not interested, I said flatly. Green Horizon is mine. I built it from nothing, while you were busy destroying our family's legacy. Don't be so dramatic, Ryan sighed. Business is business. Kingston failed. Because it was outdated, stuck in the past. Green Horizon has potential, but you need more than potential to compete in today's market. You need connections, influence. Which you claim to have? I do have them. His tone shifted, becoming more serious. Eliza, I'm not asking to take over. I've learned from my mistakes. I'm offering to be a silent partner. Financial support and strategic connections only. You'd maintain operational control. With strings attached, I'm sure. Ryan leaned back, studying me. You've always been smart, but also stubborn. 2. Stubborn to see a good opportunity even when it's right in front of you. And you've always mistaken my principles for stubbornness, I countered. Some things aren't for sale, Ryan. My company is one of them. He took a sip of his coffee, eyes never leaving mine. What if I told you I could help you secure the Eastwood Valley Cooperative account? My heart skipped a beat. Eastwood Valley was the largest agricultural cooperative in the region, representing over 50 farms. Kingston had been trying to land them as clients for years without success. If Green Horizon could secure that account, it would transform our financial outlook overnight. Ryan saw the flicker of interest before I could hide it. Ah, now I have your attention. How? I asked, hating the fact that I was engaging with his manipulation, but unable to ignore the potential opportunity. I've made friends in interesting places these past few months. One of them sits on Eastwood Valley's board. They're looking for a new supplier, and I could make sure Green Horizon is at the top of their list. It was tempting, dangerously so. The Eastwood Valley account would solve our cash flow concerns instantly, but I knew better than to trust Ryan's promises. And what would you want in return? Because you've never done anything without calculating the benefit to yourself first. Ryan smiled, recognizing the truth in my assessment. 25%. Ownership of Green Horizon. Non-voting shares. I wouldn't interfere in daily operations. Absolutely not. Think about it, Eliza. With my investment and the Eastwood Valley account, Green Horizon could expand regionally within a year. You could be bigger than Kingston ever was. I stood up, placing a few bills on the table for my untouched coffee. Green Horizon will grow on its own terms, not yours. Stay away from my business, Ryan. And if you have any decency left, stay away from Mom and Dad too. They've suffered enough because of your actions. As I walked past Nora's table, I gave her a slight nod indicating she should stay. I wanted her to observe what Ryan did after I left, whether he made any calls or met with anyone else. Outside in the parking lot, I took several deep breaths of the cool afternoon air, trying to clear my head. Despite my firm rejection of Ryan's offer, doubt crept in. The Eastwood Valley account would be transformative for Green Horizon. Was I letting pride stand in the way of a legitimate business opportunity? No, I decided as I drove back to the warehouse. It wasn't pride, it was wisdom. Ryan had proven repeatedly that he couldn't be trusted. Any partnership with him would eventually lead to disaster, no matter how attractive the initial terms might seem. Back at Green Horizon, I threw myself into work, determined to find another way to secure our financial future. I spent hours reviewing our client acquisition strategy, identifying potential growth areas, and refining our cash flow projections. Late that evening, my phone rang. It was Nora. Ryan stayed at the diner for another hour after you left, she reported. Made several calls, seemed agitated. Then a man in a suit joined him. Older guy, gray hair, expensive watch. They talked for about 20 minutes, and Ryan didn't look happy when they finished. Did you recognize the man? No, but I took a discreet photo. Nora paused. Eliza, there's something else. I overheard part of their conversation when I walked past to use the restroom. The man said something about, the board won't wait much longer, and commitments have been made. Ryan told him to buy more time. My mind raced with possibilities. What board was the man referring to? What commitments had been made? Send me the photo, I said. And thank you, Nora. This is valuable information. When the photo arrived, I studied it carefully but didn't recognize the man. However, something about him seemed vaguely familiar, as if I might have seen him at a business function or industry event. I forwarded the image to Linda, who had connections throughout the regional agricultural business community. Any idea who this is? I texted alongside the photo. Her response came the next morning. Edgar Whitman, board member for Eastwood Valley Cooperative and 3 other agricultural organizations, known for being heavily involved in local politics, too. So Ryan hadn't been bluffing about his connection to Eastwood Valley. But what was the nature of this relationship? And what commitments had been made? My curiosity deepened when, 3 days later, Green Horizon received an unexpected email from the Eastwood Valley Cooperative, requesting a meeting to discuss potentially becoming their primary supplier. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. It's a trap, Nora insisted when I called her. Ryan's setting you up somehow. Maybe, I conceded. But what if it's not? Eastwood Valley would be our biggest client by far. We can't afford to dismiss the opportunity without at least exploring. After considerable deliberation, I agreed to the meeting, scheduled for the following week at Eastwood Valley's headquarters. In the meantime, I instructed Linda to discreetly investigate Edgar Whitman's business dealings and any potential connections to Ryan. The day before the Eastwood Valley meeting, Linda called me into her office, closing the door behind us. I found something concerning, she said, voice low. 3 months ago, a new company was registered in Delaware, Vertex Agricultural Holdings. The filing's structured to obscure ownership, but I managed to trace it. Ryan is a silent partner, alongside Edgar Whitman and 2 other Eastwood Valley board members. My stomach dropped. The same Vertex that was receiving payments from Kingston before the collapse? Linda nodded grimly. The very same. And there's more. Vertex has been quietly acquiring small agricultural supply companies across 3 states. Based on their current holdings and pending deals, they're positioning to become a regional powerhouse in the agricultural supply chain. The pieces began falling into place. Ryan's not interested in partnering with Green Horizon, I realized. He wants to acquire us as part of Vertex's expansion. That would be my assessment, Linda agreed. And the Eastwood Valley account could be the carrot to lure you in, or the stick to force you out if you refuse to sell. I paced Linda's small office, thinking through the implications. The meeting tomorrow, it could be legitimate, or it could be a setup. How do you want to handle it? It was a crucial question. Refusing the meeting might mean losing a potentially transformative client. Proceeding naively might walk me straight into Ryan's manipulation. I needed a third option. I'll go, I decided, but I'll be prepared for whatever game they're playing. And I'll have a counter move ready. That night, I worked late into the evening, preparing two distinct proposals for Eastwood Valley. One standard offering, and one that incorporated an innovative approach to sustainable agricultural supplies that I had been developing as a long-term project for Green Horizon. It was a concept that Kingston had never embraced, a closed-loop system where packaging and waste materials were reclaimed and repurposed, significantly reducing costs and environmental impact. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional attire and drove to Eastwood Valley's headquarters, a modern building surrounded by demonstration fields showcasing various agricultural techniques. As I entered the boardroom, I immediately spotted Edgar Whitman among the 5 people waiting for me. His expression betrayed nothing, but I noted how his eyes assessed me with calculation rather than curiosity. Ms. Kingston, the cooperative's president, a woman named Susan Richards, greeted me warmly. Thank you for joining us today. The meeting began conventionally enough. Introductions all around, discussion of Eastwood Valley's supply needs, questions about Green Horizon's capacity and pricing structure. I presented my standard proposal first, addressing their stated requirements efficiently and professionally. Then, carefully observing Edgar Whitman's reactions, I casually mentioned, I understand Vertex Agricultural Holdings has also expressed interest in working with Eastwood Valley. A flicker of surprise crossed Whitman's face before he controlled. Susan Richards looked confused. Vertex? I'm not familiar with that company. No? I feigned surprise. I understood they had connections with your board. My mistake. Edgar Whitman cleared his throat. Vertex is a new player in the market. They've approached several agricultural organizations recently, but we haven't had formal discussions with them. The lie was smooth, practiced. I smiled, pleasantly, and moved on, but I had confirmed what I needed to know. The other board members weren't aware of Whitman's connection to Vertex. This wasn't an official Eastwood Valley strategy. It was a side play by Whitman and his co-conspirators. As the meeting continued, I shifted to my second proposal, the closed-loop sustainable supply system. As I outlined the environmental benefits and long-term cost savings, I could see genuine interest from most of the board members, including Susan Richards. This is innovative, she commented. None of our other potential suppliers have proposed anything similar. It's a significant investment up front, I acknowledged, but the 3-year projection shows a 30% reduction in packaging waste and a 15% cost savings once the system is fully implemented. Edgar Whitman wasn't pleased with the direction the meeting had taken. It sounds theoretical rather than proven, he interjected. Eastwood Valley needs reliability, not experiments. I was ready for this objection. Green Horizon has already implemented a pilot version of this system with 3 farms in the county. I've included their testimonials and actual waste reduction metrics in the appendix of your proposal packages. The meeting concluded with Susan Richards expressing strong interest in both proposals, but particularly the sustainable option. We'll need to review these numbers carefully and discuss as a full board, she said. But I'm impressed with Green Horizon's approach. We'll be in touch within the week. As we were leaving, Edgar Whitman maneuvered to walk out alongside me. "Impressive performance," he said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of threat. "But you're playing a dangerous game, Ms. Kingston." I met his gaze steadily. "No games, Mr. Whitman. Just honest business. Something you and my brother might want to consider trying." His expression hardened. "Ryan warned me you were stubborn. Consider carefully before you make an enemy of Vertex. We have resources you can't imagine." "And I have integrity you can't buy," I replied evenly. "Please give my brother a message. Green Horizon isn't for sale. Not to him, not to Vertex, not to anyone." As I drove back to the warehouse, I felt both exhilarated and uneasy. The meeting with Eastwood Valley had gone better than I'd hoped. Susan Richards' interest in the sustainable supply system seemed genuine. But I had also openly antagonized Edgar Whitman and, by extension, whatever operation he and Ryan were building with Vertex. My phone rang just as I pulled into Green Horizon's parking lot. It was my father. "I heard you met with Eastwood Valley today," he said without preamble. News traveled fast in our agricultural community. "Yes, it went well, I think." "And you encountered Edgar Whitman?" I frowned, surprised by his knowledge. "Yes. Do you know him?" "Not personally," my father replied. "But I've been making inquiries about Vertex. Their acquisition pattern concerns me." This was unexpected, my father taking an active interest in current agricultural business developments despite his setbacks. "They're strategically acquiring suppliers across the region," I confirmed, "and Ryan is involved somehow." My father was quiet for a moment. "Eliza, I need to show you something. Can you meet me at the house tomorrow morning?" Curiosity overcame my hesitation. "All right, 9 o'clock?" "9 is fine. And Eliza, come alone, please." The request was odd enough to leave me wondering what my father had discovered about Vertex that required such privacy. As I entered the warehouse, those thoughts were temporarily pushed aside by the day-to-day demands of running Green Horizon, but they lingered in the back of my mind throughout the evening. The next morning dawned cool and clear, a perfect spring day that belied the tension I felt driving to my parents' house. They had moved to a small rental on the other side of town after losing their home in the Kingston bankruptcy, a modest place that seemed to physically represent how far they had fallen. My mother opened the door when I arrived, embracing me briefly. She looked older, more subdued, but there was a warmth in her eyes that had been missing during the difficult days of Kingston's collapse. "He's in the study," she said, gesturing, down the hallway. "He's been up half the night with his old files." The study was a converted spare bedroom, now filled with boxes of salvaged documents from Kingston Agricultural Supplies. My father sat at a small desk in the corner, surrounded by stacks of papers and folders. "Eliza," he looked up as I entered. "Thank you for coming." "What's this about, Dad? What have you found?" He gestured to a chair beside the desk. "Sit. I need to show you something about Vertex, and about what really happened to Kingston." He placed a folder in front of me, opened to reveal financial statements and contracts. "These are from 6 months before Kingston's collapse. Notice, anything unusual?" I scanned the documents carefully. At first glance, they appeared to be standard supplier agreements, but as I looked closer, I noticed something strange. The terms were subtly unfavorable to Kingston: extended payment windows, penalties for late deliveries, minimum order requirements far above our normal inventory levels. "These terms are terrible," I said. "Why would you agree to them?" "I didn't," my father replied grimly. "Ryan negotiated these contracts as part of his modernization of our supplier relationships. He assured me they were industry standard." I continued examining the documents, a sinking feeling growing in my stomach. "These suppliers, they're all now part of Vertex's network, aren't they?" My father nodded. "Every one of them. Acquired? within months of Kingston's bankruptcy. So this wasn't just Ryan embezzling funds, I realized, the full picture becoming clear. This was systematic sabotage. He deliberately set Kingston up to fail so these suppliers would struggle and be vulnerable to acquisition by Vertex. And now they're targeting Green Horizon, my father concluded, not just as another acquisition, but because you represent a threat to their regional strategy, and because Ryan has a personal score to settle with you. The implications were staggering. Ryan hadn't just abandoned a failing business. He had engineered its downfall as part of a larger scheme, and now he was positioning himself, through Vertex, to dominate the very market that Kingston had once served. "We need to warn Eastwood Valley," I said, already reaching for my phone. "Edgar Whitman is manipulating them into a dangerous dependency on Vertex-controlled suppliers." My father placed his hand over mine, stopping me. "There's more, Eliza. Something I discovered just last night." He pulled another document from the bottom of the stack, a contract with highlighting on several clauses. "This is the loan agreement for the Southwest expansion. I signed it, but I never read all the fine print. Ryan assured me it was standard language." He tapped the highlighted section. "This clause gives the lender extraordinary rights in case of default, including the right to immediately acquire all intellectual property, client lists, and proprietary business methods developed by Kingston." I read the clause with growing alarm. Who was the lender? "A company called Meridian Financial." He met my eyes. "A subsidiary of a holding company that now appears to be part of Vertex's corporate structure." The full extent of Ryan's betrayal took my breath away. He engineered the entire collapse. The Southwest expansion wasn't just a bad business decision, it was designed to fail from the beginning. My father nodded, his expression a mixture of shame and determination. "I've been a fool, Eliza, but I won't let Ryan destroy what you're building now. We need to fight back." For the first time since Kingston's collapse, I saw a glimpse of the businessman my father had once been. Strategic, resolute, uncompromising when necessary. Despite everything that had happened between us, I felt a surge of gratitude for his support now, when the stakes were highest. How do we fight an organization with these kinds of resources and this level of ruthlessness? I asked. My father's expression hardened with resolve. "We expose them. To Eastwood Valley, to the other cooperatives, to everyone in the agricultural community. Ryan and Vertex have been operating in the shadows. It's time to bring them into the light." As I left my parents' house that morning, I felt a curious blend of anger and clarity. Ryan's message suddenly made perfect sense, not as an olive branch between siblings, but as the opening move in a calculated attack against the business I was building. He had never intended to partner with Green Horizon. He had intended to destroy it, just as he had destroyed Kingston. But unlike Kingston, Green Horizon wouldn't fall victim to his schemes. I had something Ryan had never truly possessed: the trust of the agricultural community we served, built on genuine relationships and honest business practices. And now, armed with the truth about Vertex's operations, I had the weapon I needed to protect that community from Ryan's predatory strategy. The battle ahead would be challenging, perhaps the greatest test I had yet faced as a business owner. But as I drove back to Green Horizon, I felt more determined than ever. This wasn't just about saving my company anymore. It was about preventing Ryan and Vertex from corrupting an entire agricultural ecosystem that sustained thousands of families. Sometimes, I reflected, the greatest opportunities for growth come from the most difficult challenges. And this challenge, exposing Vertex's scheme and protecting the agricultural community from their manipulation, might just be the defining moment for Green Horizon, and for me. The revelation about Ryan's methodical sabotage of Kingston changed everything. As I drove back to Green Horizon, my mind raced with strategies and counter-strategies. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal, calculated destruction that had hurt my family and threatened an entire community of farmers who depended on reliable agricultural supplies. By the time I reached the warehouse, I had the outline of a plan. The first step was clear. I needed to secure Eastwood Valley as a client before Vertex could manipulate them further. I called an emergency meeting with my leadership team, Linda from accounting, Marcus, who headed our sales division, and Tara, who managed our sustainable products initiative. "We need to move faster than planned," I announced as they gathered. In my office. "Vertex is more dangerous than we realized, and we can't afford to wait for them to strike first." I laid out everything I had learned: Ryan's systematic dismantling of Kingston through unfavorable contracts, the engineered loan, default, and now Vertex's regional acquisition strategy with Ryan and Edgar Whitman at its center. My team listened in stunned silence, expressions morphing from shock to anger and finally to determination. "So what's our play?" Marcus asked when I finished. "We don't have the resources to fight a company with Vertex's backing." "We fight them with the truth," I replied, "and with relationships they can't buy." Over the next 3 hours, we developed a comprehensive strategy. Tara would accelerate the Sustainable Supply Chain Initiative, positioning Green Horizon as the environmentally conscious alternative to Vertex's profit-driven model. Marcus would personally visit our key clients to reinforce relationships and subtly educate them about Vertex's predatory practices. Linda would compile a financial analysis showing how Vertex's supplier terms would ultimately harm farmers' bottom lines. As for me, I had the most challenging task, presenting our case directly to Eastwood Valley's full board, including the members who weren't yet compromised by Edgar Whitman. "This is risky," Linda warned. "If you publicly accuse Ryan and Whitman, without ironclad proof, Vertex could sue Green Horizon into oblivion." "That's why we need to be smart about this," I acknowledged. "We present facts, not accusations. We show patterns, not conspiracies. We let the board members connect the I dots themselves." The next morning, I called Susan Richards, Eastwood Valley's president, and requested an urgent meeting with the full board. To my surprise, she agreed immediately. "Several board members had questions after your presentation yesterday," she explained. "There's significant interest in your sustainable supply model, but also some concerns that deserve addressing." "I'd be happy to address them," I said, carefully keeping my tone neutral. "Would tomorrow afternoon work?" "I'll make it happen," she promised. After hanging up, I threw myself into preparation. I needed compelling evidence of Vertex's strategy without directly accusing them of illegal activity. I gathered financial reports, contract terms, acquisition timelines, and testimonials from farmers who had been negatively impacted by supplier changes after Vertex's quiet acquisitions. That evening, my father called. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "I'd like to help, if you'll let me." I hesitated. Despite our recent reconciliation, I wasn't sure how my father could contribute to this fight. "What did you have in mind?" "I spent 30 years in this industry," he replied. "I know the players, the history, the unwritten rules, and I was there for the early deals that Ryan negotiated, the ones that started Kingston's downfall. Let me testify to that before the Eastwood Valley Board." The offer took me by surprise. "Dad, are you sure? This would mean publicly acknowledging how Ryan manipulated you, how he betrayed the family." "It's time for the truth, Eliza," he said simply. "I let pride blind me once. I won't make that mistake again." His willingness to face this public reckoning moved me deeply. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Your testimony could make all the difference." The next afternoon, my father and I arrived at Eastwood Valley's headquarters together. He looked different somehow, his posture straighter, his expression focused. For a moment, I glimpsed the businessman who had once commanded respect throughout the agricultural community. The boardroom was full when we entered, all 12 board members present, including Edgar Whitman, who couldn't hide his surprise at seeing my father. "Thank you for accommodating this urgent meeting," Susan Richards began. "Ms. Kingston has requested time to provide additional information regarding Green Horizons' proposal and to address some broader industry concerns." I stepped forward, projecting confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Thank you, Ms. Richards. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce my father, Harold Kingston, former CEO of Kingston Agricultural Supplies. He has relevant industry perspective to share today." Edgar Whitman shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Is this appropriate? We're here to discuss Green Horizons' proposal, not Kingston's failed business." "Actually," I replied smoothly, "understanding the factors that led to Kingston's failure is directly relevant to the decision facing Eastwood Valley today." I began my presentation methodically, establishing a timeline of regional agricultural supply business acquisitions over the past 18 months. Without naming Vertex directly, I highlighted the pattern, how each acquisition was preceded by unusual contract terms that weakened the target company, how prices increased after acquisition, and how farmer choices became increasingly limited. The agricultural supply chain in our region is being systematically consolidated, I explained, showing a map with color-coded markers indicating the acquired businesses. Which brings us to why Green Horizon is different. We are locally owned, committed to this community, and structured to resist the type of predatory acquisition strategies that have affected so many others. Edgar Whitman interrupted, his voice sharp. "This is absurd. You're spinning conspiracy theories to distract from the fact that your company is too small and undercapitalized to properly serve Eastwood Valley's needs." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm simply presenting documented business transactions, Mr. Whitman. But perhaps you'd like to disclose your own connection to these acquisitions. Your role with Vertex Agricultural Holdings, for instance." A murmur ran through the room. Several board members turned to look at Whitman, whose face had flushed dark red. "I don't know what you're insinuating," he began, but Susan Richards cut him off. "Edgar, do you have a relationship with this Vertex company that you haven't disclosed to the board?" Before he could answer, my father stood up. For the next 20 minutes, he detailed Ryan's systematic dismantling of Kingston Agricultural Supplies, the unfavorable contracts, the manipulated Southwest expansion, the engineered loan default. He spoke with clarity and regret, taking full responsibility for his failure to recognize what was happening until it was too late. "I trusted my son," he concluded, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "I gave him control of a business that had served this community for generations, and he deliberately destroyed it as part of a larger strategy to monopolize the regional agricultural supply chain. The same strategy that now threatens the independence of cooperatives, like Eastwood Valley." The room was silent when he finished. Edgar Whitman stared at the table, not meeting anyone's eyes. Susan Richards looked troubled. "These are serious allegations," she said finally. "Mr. Whitman, would you care to respond?" Whitman cleared, his throat. "Harold Kingston is a bitter man trying to blame others for his business failures. Vertex is a legitimate agricultural investment firm that has revitalized struggling suppliers. Yes, I do consulting work for them, which I wasn't required to disclose since we haven't done business with them. This entire presentation is a desperate attempt to secure a contract through fear-mongering instead of competitive terms." It was the response I had expected: denial, minimization, and deflection. But I was prepared. "I anticipated that perspective," I said calmly, "which is why I've prepared this analysis of what Eastwood Valley can expect if you partner with a Vertex-controlled supplier." I distributed folders containing detailed financial projections showing how initial favorable terms would gradually transform into dependency and price increases based on documented patterns from other Vertex acquisitions. In contrast, I continued, here is Green Horizons' commitment. A 5-year contract with transparent pricing, no hidden escalation clauses, and our innovative sustainable supply chain model that will reduce your packaging waste costs by 30% within 3 years. Susan Richards studied the documents carefully before addressing the board. I believe we have a lot to consider. Ms. Kingston, Mr. Kingston, thank you for your candor today. The board will need to deliberate privately. As we gathered our materials to leave, Edgar Whitman approached us, his voice low and threatening. You've made a serious mistake today. Ryan won't take this lightly. My father stepped between us. My son has already done his worst to me, Mr. Whitman, but he underestimated my daughter, as I suspect you have too. Outside in the parking lot, I turned to my father. Thank you for doing that. I know it wasn't easy. He nodded, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. For too long, I convinced myself that Ryan's behavior was just youthful irresponsibility, that he would grow into the man I wanted him to be if I just gave him the right opportunities. He shook his head. I was wrong, and that mistake cost us everything. Not everything, I said quietly. We're still here, still fighting. He smiled then, a genuine smile that reminded me of happier times. Yes, and more importantly, you're building something honest. Something that serves this community the way Kingston was always meant to. As we drove away from Eastwood Valley, I felt a strange sense of peace, despite the uncertainty ahead. We had done everything possible to expose Vertex's strategy. Now, it was up to the board to make their decision. The next week was one of the most intense of my professional life. Green Horizon continued its daily operations, fulfilling orders and serving clients, while the leadership team and I worked around the clock on contingency plans. If Eastwood Valley rejected Vertex and chose us, we would need to scale up rapidly. If they went with Vertex, we would need to fortify our existing client relationships against inevitable competitive pressure. Meanwhile, Ryan wasn't staying idle. 3 of our smaller clients called to inform us they were switching suppliers. After receiving unbeatable offers from a new company, undoubtedly a Vertex subsidiary, our main seed supplier suddenly claimed inventory shortages and delivery delays, forcing us to scramble for alternative sources. They're trying to strangle us slowly, Linda observed during our morning meeting. Classic predatory tactics. Poach. Some clients disrupt our supply chain, force us to underperform for remaining clients. Then we need to move faster than they can, I replied. Tara, where are we with the new organic suppliers from the western counties? Contracts nearly finalized, she reported. They're excited about our sustainable packaging model. Could be operational within 2 weeks. Accelerate that to 1 week if possible, I instructed. Marcus, what about the community education initiative? Marcus grinned. The Know Your Agricultural Supply Chain workshops are fully booked. First session is tomorrow night at the County Agricultural Center. I nodded, pleased with our progress. We were fighting back on multiple fronts, securing alternative suppliers, educating farmers about Vertex's tactics, and positioning Green Horizon as the locally owned, environmentally responsible alternative. That afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. Parking lot. Now. Important information about Vertex. Cautious but curious, I asked Linda to call me in 5 minutes with a fabricated emergency if I didn't text her first. Then I walked out to the parking lot, scanning the area carefully. A man sat in a nondescript sedan, window rolled down. As I approached, I recognized him, one of Eastwood Valley's board members who had been present at our presentation. Ms. Kingston, he called softly. Sorry for the cloak and dagger approach. I'm David Mercer. What can I do for you, Mr. Mercer? I remained standing, maintaining a safe distance from the car. The board vote is tomorrow, he said. It's close. Whitman has 3 votes locked up. You have 4, with 5 still undecided. This was valuable intelligence, but I was puzzled by his willingness to share it. "Why are you telling me this?" He hesitated. "My family has farmed in this valley for 5 generations. I've watched these corporate consolidations destroy farming communities across the country. The same pattern every time: promises of better prices, then dependency, then exploitation when farmers have no alternatives left." He met my eyes directly. "I believe you're fighting for something important, beyond just your business." "I am," I confirmed. "But what do you need from me?" "The undecided votes are concerned about Green Horizons' financial stability for a contract of this magnitude. They like your vision, but worry about execution. If you could provide additional financial guarantees or partnership documentation demonstrating your capacity to scale." I considered this carefully. "I can prepare something by tomorrow morning. Would you be able to ensure it reaches the right people?" He nodded. "Leave it at the front desk addressed to me. I'll make sure it circulates before the vote." He started his car, then paused. "One more thing. Ryan Kingston is planning to attend tomorrow's meeting as a regional agricultural business expert. Just so you're prepared." After he drove away, I texted Linda the all clear and returned to my office, mind racing. The board vote was closer than I'd dared hope, but Ryan's planned appearance was concerning. What evidence or arguments would he present to sway the undecided votes? More pressing was the need for additional financial guarantees that David Mercer had mentioned. Green Horizons' finances were sound but stretched thin with our recent expansion. We didn't have significant additional reserves to offer as guarantees for a contract of Eastwood Valley's size. I considered the options. We could try to secure emergency financing from the bank, but that would take time we didn't have. We could propose a phased implementation of the contract, starting smaller and growing as we demonstrated performance, but that might not satisfy the board's concerns. Or I could accept my parents' investment offer, the retirement funds they had proposed contributing to Green Horizon. It would provide the financial cushion needed to reassure Eastwood Valley, but it would also mean entangling my parents in a high-risk business confrontation with Ryan. After everything they'd already lost, could I ask that of them? After hours of deliberation, I called my parents and asked them to meet me at Green Horizon that evening. When they arrived, I explained the situation frankly: the board's concerns, the upcoming vote, and Ryan's planned intervention. "I need to show financial capacity beyond what Green Horizon currently has," I concluded, "and I'm considering accepting your investment offer." My mother spoke first, surprising me. "We've been waiting for you to say yes. The papers are already drawn up." She pulled a folder from her purse and placed it on my desk. I stared at them, taken aback. "You prepared?" "The investment documents already?" My father nodded. "After the Eastwood Valley presentation, we knew you'd need additional backing to face what's coming. This was never just about helping you financially, Eliza. It's about standing with you against what Ryan is doing." I opened the folder, examining the terms. They had structured it as a silent partnership with no operational control, exactly what I would have requested. The amount was significant: their entire remaining retirement savings. "Are you absolutely certain?" I asked, looking from one to the other. "This is your security, your future." "Our future is tied to yours now," my father said simply. "And, more importantly, to what you're building. Green Horizon represents everything Kingston Agricultural Supplies was supposed to be: honest, community-focused, forward-thinking. We believe in that vision. We believe in you." Moved by their faith, I signed the papers. With their investment secured, I spent the rest of the night preparing a comprehensive financial stability package for the Eastwood Valley Board, detailing Green Horizons' strengthened capital position, our phased implementation plan for their contract, and performance guarantees backed by our new financial resources. Early the next morning, I delivered the package to Eastwood Valley's headquarters as arranged with David Mercer. Then I returned to Green Horizon, trying to focus on regular business operations while awaiting news of the board's decision. The call came just after 3 p.m. Susan Richards herself, her voice carefully neutral. The board has reached a decision. Ms. Kingston, we'd like to discuss the terms in person. Can you come to our offices at 4 p.m. today? Of course, I agreed, giving nothing away in my tone despite my racing heart. I'll be there. I arrived at Eastwood Valley precisely at 4, prepared for either outcome. The receptionist directed me to a small conference room rather than the main boardroom, which I couldn't help interpreting as a potentially negative sign. To my surprise, only Susan Richards and David Mercer were waiting for me. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Susan began. The board vote was completed an hour ago, but we've had some complications. My stomach tightened. What kind of complications? Your brother made quite a presentation, David explained. Brought in agricultural economists predicting market downturns, questioned Green Horizon's experience with contracts. Of this magnitude, implied that your sustainable supply chain model was unproven and risky. And yet, Susan continued, the board voted 7-5 in favor of Green Horizon's proposal. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by confusion. That's wonderful news. But if the vote is decided, what are the complications? Susan and David exchanged glances. Edgar Whitman and Ryan Kingston didn't take the decision well, Susan said carefully. They suggested that's certain. Regulatory concerns might arise if Eastwood Valley proceeded with Green Horizon. Implied that operating licenses could become problematic for farms associated with the cooperative. They're threatening you, I translated, anger rising, using political connections to intimidate the cooperative. Essentially, David confirmed. They've requested a 24-hour reconsideration period before the contract is finalized. I took a deep breath, considering our options. This was a critical moment. If Eastwood Valley backtracked now, it would not only cost Green Horizon a vital contract, but would signal to the entire agricultural community that Vertex and its tactics were too powerful to resist. Ms. Richards, Mr. Mercer, I began, choosing my words carefully. What Ryan and Vertex are doing isn't just unethical, it likely crosses into illegal territory. Market manipulation, coercion, possible violations of antitrust regulations. They're counting on fear to accomplish what they couldn't achieve through legitimate business competition. We understand that, Susan replied, but these farmers have families to feed, mortgages to pay. The regulatory threats, even if ultimately baseless, could cause severe short-term hardship. I nodded, acknowledging the real-world implications, which is exactly why this pattern needs to be broken now, before their control becomes absolute. I leaned forward, conviction in my voice. Green Horizon is prepared to stand with Eastwood Valley against these intimidation tactics. We have documented evidence of Vertex's predatory patterns across the region. Together, we could take this evidence to state regulators and the agricultural press. David looked intrigued but cautious. That's a major confrontation. Are you certain Green Horizon is prepared for the potential backlash? We are, I said firmly. And we're not alone. My father is willing to publicly testify about how these same tactics were used to destroy Kingston Agricultural Supplies. We've been contacted by 3 other family-owned supply companies with similar experiences. There's power in our collective voice that Ryan and Vertex can't silence. Susan and David exchanged another look, some unspoken communication passing between them. The board reconvenes tomorrow at 9 a.m. for the final decision, Susan said finally. I believe they would be interested in hearing this perspective before they vote. Would you and your father be willing to address them one more time? Absolutely, I agreed. And if possible, I'd like to bring someone else, Linda Davis, our financial director who was with Kingston during its collapse. She has specific documentation of the financial manipulation techniques that were employed. The more evidence, the better, David nodded. This has moved beyond a simple supplier selection. The board needs to understand exactly what they're facing. As I drove back to Green Horizon, I felt the weight of what lay ahead. Tomorrow's presentation wouldn't just determine whether we secured the Eastwood Valley contract. It would be a public stand against the predatory business practices that Ryan and Vertex represented. It was a fight with far-reaching implications for the entire agricultural community. I called my father to explain the situation, and he immediately agreed to join me the next morning. Then I contacted Linda, who offered to work through the night compiling the most compelling financial evidence of Vertex's manipulation patterns. That evening, as I was finalizing our presentation in my office, my phone rang with an unknown number. Somehow I knew who it was before I answered. "Hello, Ryan. You just can't help yourself, can you?" His voice was cold, controlled anger vibrating beneath the surface. Always the righteous crusader, fighting for justice while conveniently positioning yourself to profit from the outcome. "That's your lens, not mine," I replied calmly. "I'm building an honest business that serves its community. You're building a monopoly through manipulation and threats." He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "So self-righteous. Tell me, Eliza, does it bother you at all that you're sacrificing Mom and Dad's last chance at financial security for your moral crusade? Because when Vertex is finished with Green Horizon, there won't be anything left. Again." The threat was explicit, but I refused to be intimidated. The difference between us, Ryan, has always been that I understand what true security means. It isn't just money in an account. It's integrity, community, purpose, things you've never valued. "Spare me the lecture," he snapped. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, Eastwood Valley will reject your proposal and sign with our preferred supplier. Green Horizon will lose 3 more major clients by the end of the month. By summer, you'll be closing your doors. That's not a threat. It's a business forecast." "We'll see," I said simply. "Bullies and predators always seem invincible until someone stands up to them." "Always the hero in your own story," he scoffed. "Good luck tomorrow, sis. You're going to need it." After he hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the conversation. Ryan's confidence was unsettling. Did he have some leverage with Eastwood Valley that I didn't know about? Some card he hadn't yet played? Despite the uncertainty, I felt strangely calm. For the first time since Kingston's collapse, the path ahead was absolutely clear. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about winning a contract. It would be about standing for principles that transcended business competition. It would be about demonstrating that integrity and community could triumph over exploitation and greed. I worked late into the night, refining our presentation and strategy, preparing for every possible scenario. Whatever happened tomorrow, Green Horizon would make its stand. And in doing so, we would define not just our business identity, but our place in the larger story of our agricultural community's future. As dawn broke, I stood at my office window watching the sunrise paint the fields surrounding Green Horizon in golden light. Those fields represented generations of hard work, family legacies, and a way of life worth protecting. Today, we would fight not just for Green Horizon's survival, but for the independence and sustainability of the entire agricultural ecosystem that depended on fair, ethical business practices. With that thought firmly in mind, I gathered my materials and prepared to face whatever the day would bring. Win or lose, some battles defined you by the simple act of fighting them. This was one of those battles, and I was ready. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.